I still remember the day I got my very first car. It wasn't shiny, new, or glamorous in any way. In fact, it looked like the automotive version of a tired middle-aged man who had long ago given up on dreams of becoming a rock star. The paint was faded, one headlight had the permanent expression of being half asleep, and the radio only played static, unless you held the antenna at a very specific angle, preferably while driving uphill and singing to distract it. But to me, it was perfect. This car wasn't just transportation. It was independence. It was freedom. It was the magical key to all the adventures I had only dreamed about. At least, that's what I told myself as I proudly placed my hands on the cracked steering wheel and inhaled the musty smell of old upholstery mixed with stale pine-scented air freshener. I named it Thunderbolt, not because it was fast, but because every time I started the engine, it coughed and roared like Zeus himself was trying to clear his throat. My neighbors could always tell when I was leaving. Children would stop playing and look up. Birds would scatter. Even the local stray cat gave me a judgmental stare, as if to say, "Really? You're taking that thing on the road?" But nothing could dampen my enthusiasm. The morning of my maiden voyage, I woke up early. I couldn't sleep anyway, I was too excited. I checked the oil, the tires, and the mysterious puddle under the car that I decided to optimistically call character. With my playlist ready on a CD I burned the night before, because yes, this car still had a CD player, I turned the key. Thunderbolt groaned, wheezed, then finally gave a victorious roar. We were alive. I pulled out of the driveway, heart pounding, gripping the steering wheel as if it might suddenly fly away. The world felt different from behind the wheel. The houses looked smaller, the roads stretched longer, and for once, I was the one in control. I pressed the gas pedal too gently at first because the car moved forward at the pace of a nervous snail. Eventually, I found my rhythm. "Look at me," I whispered proudly. "I'm driving." The plan was simple. Take a short trip to the countryside, enjoy the scenery, maybe stop for ice cream, and return home triumphant. What could possibly go wrong? About 10 minutes into my drive, Thunderbolt began to reveal his true personality. First, the air conditioner decided to retire. Instead of cool air, it blew hot gusts that felt like dragon breath. Then the windshield wipers activated on their own, even though the sky was perfectly clear. I fiddled with buttons, knobs, and switches, none of which seemed connected to anything logical. It was as if the car had been designed by a mischievous engineer who enjoyed chaos. Still, I pressed on. Soon, I noticed a sign for a scenic detour, a country road lined with trees. Perfect for a peaceful first adventure. I turned, humming along to my skipping CD. The road was beautiful. Golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, birds swooped overhead, and for a brief, magical moment, I felt like the star of my own indie movie. But then the smell arrived. A burning, smoky, metallic smell. I panicked. Was the car on fire? Had I doomed myself on my very first trip? I pulled over and popped the hood, half expecting flames. Instead, I was greeted by steam hissing from the radiator like an angry teapot. I had forgotten one small detail: Thunderbolt's thirst for coolant. As I stood by the roadside, scratching my head and wondering if pouring bottled water from my backpack into the radiator was a good idea, spoiler, it was the only idea. I heard footsteps. Turning around, I saw a man walking toward me, carrying a toolbox. "Car trouble?" he asked, with the calm authority of someone who had definitely seen worse. "Yes," I admitted. "It's my first car. First drive. First everything." He chuckled. "Ah, the first car curse. Don't worry. You'll survive." His name was Paul, a local mechanic who lived nearby. Within minutes, he had the hood open, the radiator refilled, and the car running again. We chatted while he worked, and he told me stories about his own first car, a rusty pickup that had stranded him during a date. I laughed so hard, I nearly forgot. I was standing in the middle of nowhere with a car that wheezed like a chain smoker. When I thanked him, he simply shrugged. First cars aren't about comfort or reliability. They're about stories. You'll be telling this one for years. He was right. Feeling bolder, I decided not to turn back just yet. Instead, I pushed onward, determined to make this trip memorable. I drove past fields, small villages, and winding hills. At one point, a cow wandered onto the road and stared at me with an expression eerily similar to the stray cat's earlier judgment. But I felt unstoppable. At least until the CD player spat out my carefully burned playlist and refused to take it back. Instead, the speakers crackled with static, then picked up a random local radio station. A cheerful accordion song blared at full volume. I tried to change it, but no matter which button I pressed, the accordion refused to leave. So there I was, driving through the countryside, sweat dripping from the broken AC, with an accordion soundtrack that made me feel like I was starring in a slapstick comedy. Hours passed, and I finally decided it was time to head home. That's when I realized I had no idea where I was. My phone battery had died, rookie mistake, and Thunderbolt's navigation system was just me squinting at road signs and guessing. I took a wrong turn, then another. Before long, I was hopelessly lost. But just as panic began to set in, I noticed something in the distance, a brightly lit ice cream stand. Salvation! I pulled over, ordered the biggest cone they had, and asked the teenager behind the counter for directions. He drew me a map on a napkin, which I tucked carefully into the glove box like it was sacred treasure. Armed with ice cream and a napkin map, I set off again. Thunderbolt, perhaps sensing my desperation, behaved himself for the rest of the journey. No more random wipers, no more steaming radiator, not even a squeaky protest. It was as if he, too, wanted to get home safely. Finally, hours later, I pulled back into my driveway. I turned off the engine, which coughed one last time before falling silent. I sat there in the dark, exhausted but exhilarated. The next morning, I went outside to admire my heroic car. That's when I noticed something stuck under the windshield wiper, the ice cream napkin map. Apparently, in my excitement, I had closed the hood after my radiator incident, then tucked the napkin there absent-mindedly instead of the glove box. I had driven the entire way home, with a napkin flapping in the wind, my directions waving like a flag for everyone on the road to see. My neighbors later told me they had spotted me driving proudly through town, accordion music blasting, while a napkin danced on my windshield like a victory banner. And that, my friends, was the story of my very first adventure with my very first car. Thunderbolt never let me forget it. Neither did my neighbors. But they were right about one thing. First cars aren't about reliability, they're about stories. And I got the funniest one on day one.